Wednesdays with Will. I am Caroline Norton, and you and I are going to have some fun today. So if you remember, last week we talked about Shakespearean histories. Remember, we made our family trees. It was very fun. Well, this week I thought it would be fun if we talked about Shakespearean comedies. Now, just like in his histories, how there are certain elements that make a history a Shakespearean history, in the comedies, there are certain elements that make it a Shakespearean comedy. For example, romance is featured throughout all of the Shakespearean comedies, and that romance always ends with a marriage. Characters fall in love and they get married in the comedies. Now, the comedies also feature fun, mischievous characters called fools or clowns that come in. They provide a lot of comedic relief, and they also stir the pot a little bit. And they feature mistaken identity. Characters in the comedies will often disguise themselves as someone else to either trick somebody or to get a little extra information. So those three elements can appear in other Shakespeare plays that aren't comedies, but to have marriage and fools and mistaken identity, all three put together, that is what makes a Shakespearean comedy a comedy. Now, I would like to play the fool a little bit, if you will, and I would like to share with you some of my favorite jokes in Shakespeare plays. Now, you may be thinking, Caroline, I am not going to find any jokes that Shakespeare wrote 400 and some odd years ago to be funny. Comedy is so different now than it was way back then in Elizabethan England. And you might be right, you might not find them funny, but I wouldn't judge it too soon. A lot of Shakespeare's comedy that he wrote back then translates really well into today. Shakespeare wrote using a lot of the same types of humor that we use. For example, in Othello, which is not a comedy, it is actually a tragedy, Shakespeare has a fun joke between Cassio and the fool. Cassio asks the fool, "Dost thou hear, mine honest friend?" And the clown replies, "No, I hear not, my honest friend. I hear you." This is a really fun way that Shakespeare uses the clown character to poke fun at one of the main characters in the story, just to make sure they're not taking themselves too seriously. And this is something that we do today. This is a very common type of humor that has survived throughout the years. Now, Shakespeare also used dark comedy, some kind of morbid and self-deprecating humor, which, let's be honest, is one of the most popular types of humor today. Now, another example from a tragedy that has a lot of comedic elements is Romeo and Juliet. So in Romeo and Juliet, there's this character, Mercutio, and he's a really funny guy. Throughout the story, he's making jokes, making quips at people. But then this terrible thing happens. He gets in this really bad fight with Tybalt, and he gets stabbed really hard, and he's dying on stage before your eyes. But while he's dying, he turns to his friend Romeo, and he says, "Oh, ask for me tomorrow, and you shall find me a grave man." Get it? Grave. See, just another example of some kind of dark humor used by Shakespeare in the same way that we would today. And he also has his classic humor involving wordplay. Shakespeare was pretty big on plays on words and using a lot of witty back and forth. An example that I really like of this type of humor comes from my favorite Shakespearean comedy, Twelfth Night, or What You Will. Now, in Twelfth Night, Viola, disguised as a man called Cesario, stops Olivia's fool on the street, and she asks, "Hey, do you live by the tabor?" Now, a tabor here is a drum. She's asking him, "Hey, do you play music? Is that how you make your living?" And he responds to her by saying, "No, sir, I live by the church." "Art thou a churchman?" "No such matter, sir. For I do live by the church. For I do live at my house, and my house doth stand by the church. This is one of my favorite jokes in Twelfth Night. Now, we could just sit around and try and come up with our own Shakespeare jokes, but that might be a little difficult. So instead, I have created a Shakespearean Mad Lib modeled after the plot of one of Shakespeare's most exciting and well-known comedies, A Midsummer Night's Dream. Now, I've posted it here on the screen for you to see, and you can write it down from here and use it off of the screen, or if you would like to print it out, you can download a copy from our website at the link below. So grab a friend, grab a pencil, and have fun with your Midsummer Mad Lib. And please, as always, send us your responses at info@summitplayerstheater.com. We would love to read what you guys come up with, and we might even share it on our social media. Without any further ado, that is the end of this week's episode. We will see you next week on Wednesday for another fun talk about our friend, Mr. William Shakespeare. Until then, see you later!